Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Pandemic Interview Series. Today I'm with a very good friend and a very talented actor, Vincent Guastaferro. Vinny, he's just an amazing actor, a wonderful person, and thanks so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me, Vinny.
Sure, Stephen. Nice to see you again. And I really got to emphasize to you and your listeners how much fun I had working with you in Hawaii. That was quite an experience.
It was a
Uh,
lot of fun.
I really loved it. Yeah, I wish more films would shoot in Hawaii. Let's go back.
Right. I look forward to getting into that a little bit. Although I do have to say I was a little surprised about being in Hawaii and having to go buy a sweater. That caught me a little off guard.
Yeah, you remember that? The night we went up to see the volcano, it was like 40 degrees up there.
It was cold. Uh,
Yeah.
so I was reading through your bio, and you studied acting in Ohio and Chicago, and that's where you went to school. But when did you start acting?
Well, I started in Ohio. I had not any, it's an interesting question for me because I have students at my school, and a lot of them, they're considerably younger than me, but many of them say, "Oh," I say to them, "When did you start acting?" And they say, "Oh, I started in middle school, and then I did it in high school." I didn't do any of that. I was
Oh,
way too shy to be an actor. I know that now that you know me and my personality, the idea that I was too shy was amazing, but yeah, I was too shy to be an actor, so I entered the University of Toledo as an art major because I had a penchant for doing art. I was pretty good at it, doing art. What a weird way to do it. But anyway, I studied painting and sculpting and all of that. And because I was studying painting, my scholarship was with the theater department painting scenery, and I was in the shop painting every day, helping, paint fake bricks and period style looking walls and stuff for a play that they were doing in the theater department. And the director of the play came to the shop and found me, and he said, "Hey, you're funny. You're just naturally funny. Will you be in my play?" And I remember I said to him, "No, I don't want to do that. I don't even like actors." It was such a weird thing for me to say. Uh, but I said, "I don't like them. They just sit around all day and talk about themselves, and they're not." So I refused. And then my roommate, who was already in the play, came to me again and he said, "Hey, man, the director wants you in our play. What do we got to do to convince you to come and just, try out for it?" I said, "I got to try out? I don't even know what trying out means." So I showed up and he gave me the role. So that was that. You know what I mean? He gave me the lead part in a, a South American adaptation of the famous play Scapino. And I was cast as the lead, the Scapino character, the main clown. And that was the beginning of the end for me, because after I learned what I learned to be in that play and had such a good time, and it was so social, that I just switched majors. And let me emphasize this because it'll come out a couple of times. I was an art major working in isolation a lot. I mean, I was into sculpting and glass blowing. There wasn't a whole lot of social people there. You got to meet a couple of other art majors that were pursuing. But soon as I got into the theater, I saw how social it was. It was just great. There were groups of people meeting to go over their lines, and then they'd go out together for drinks after the play. And it was a whole shift in my social paradigm at the age of 19, 20, I guess I was. And that's how I got into it in Toledo. Then I majored, and that was that. I graduated with honors, and I was looking for the next logical step. And the next logical step was, well, apply to grad schools. And I applied to like 4 or 5 grad schools. I got into 3 of them, and I ended up choosing Chicago because I loved the city and I loved the program that I was getting into. Plus, they gave me the best scholarship. So
that's always nice. How did your parents feel about you going from, or did they care, moving from art and doing that kind of thing into acting?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. I'm the youngest in a big family. So, and my parents were both immigrants. So by the time I was of that age, they were clueless as to what I was up to, and they were just happy I was happy. They
Nice.
did not know that what theater was. They never saw me in a play or anything like that. So they had no feeling about it one way or the other. They were just glad that I was in school and having a good time and learning, you know.
That's wonderful. I also noticed that you worked on Broadway for a while,
Yeah,
and
I did.
you were on Broadway and off Broadway, or just on Broadway?
No, I did both. They're both two different productions. So now you just jumped about 20 years, but um, Broadway is Broadway. You go to Broadway and you're doing a play, and it's the most professional engagement you'll ever have. You have 8 shows a week that must go on. You have large audiences of 7. We were in a small Broadway house, which was 760 seats. And that was a big responsibility because they're paying good money to come and see you, and you had to be there every night and deliver. That's why my school is called the Sport of Acting, because when I was on Broadway, the training regimen to be fit enough to do 8 shows a week was nothing short of a long baseball season.
I
I mean,
bet.
I had to work out every day. I had to warm up my voice every day, had to show up at the theater and review all of the dialogue every night, and then perform for a full house. And that was quite an experience. The highlight of my life, I would say. I mean, if people were to say to me, what was the most memorable acting experience you had, I would say it would be being on Broadway. Uh,
I
and then, off Broadway is a totally separate venue, and there was a theater there that I was affiliated with because of that same director who put me on Broadway. They're called the Atlantic Theater Company in New York, and they had me come in and do a couple of plays for them there. And that's also wonderful because if you're a very, very popular off-Broadway house, you still get paying customers every night in a reasonably sized house. And I was doing a play by David Mamet, so the audiences were full. People are always interested in what this terrific writer has to say and how he says it. And so I did 2 plays off Broadway for the Atlantic Theater Company as well.
so if a play is, let's say your play that you're doing is 2 hours long, when does your day
Yeah.
start? You're not there for the 2 hours. Like you said, you have to warm up your voice, your body, review. How long is a day for a Broadway actor?
About 10 hours for me. I
Every
would
day.
start every morning at 11 o'clock at a gym. A friend of mine who was a member of a gym in New York City got me a guest membership there. They were quite accommodating because they knew I was in town to do a Broadway play. So I joined that gym, and I would start out every day with almost a 2-hour workout, mostly aerobics, because for me it was all about having the wind and stamina. And then after the play, I would eat judiciously, lightly, and I would go home and maybe get 1 or 2 things done in the day, not much, and then start reviewing text and dialogue. At about 4 o'clock, I would eat again and then head over to the theater at 6, even though the show didn't start until 8, because I had a lot of pre-show warm-up routine that I did again. And I would go out on the empty stage of this big Broadway house, which was beautiful, and vocalize for about 40 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. It was so much like being an athlete with a long season.
And you
So
said
it was great.
you did a few shows on Broadway. And how long were you in New York and on Broadway and off Broadway?
Okay, so during that period of time, it was about a span of 4 years where I was in and out of New York, but when I was actually performing on Broadway, I was there for a solid 2 years. Where because the play ran 9 months and it had a 6 month pre-Broadway run up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So it required first flying to Boston, doing the play, then waiting for it to get approved to go to Broadway, then um, going back to Boston where they chose to rehearse it because the writer was from there. And we rehearsed it for about 3.5 weeks. Then there was another delay before we convened in New York and opened the show. So the process took quite a while to get a show to Broadway. And I learned a lot about that at the time too, because I thought it was, it's not ever as, when you see something, you say, wow, that's cool. You don't realize how much work went into it for it to reach the final stage that you see it in.
Yeah, nothing is developed full
Yeah.
term. And I noticed that while you
Yeah.
were, or in your bio, I noticed that while you were on Broadway, you were seen by different directors and that kind of thing. When did you make the transition from Broadway to screen, movies, TV, that kind of thing?
Okay, so that's interesting. It kind of went backwards for me. In other words, I moved to Los Angeles and I started getting roles on television, and then that led to movies, and then that led to a TV series called NYPD Blue. And after I was on that series for a while, I had enough of what do you call it? In television, they called it a Q. It's called a recognizability quotient. And by that time, I had enough of a fan base. People kind of knew who I was because I was on TV every week for a couple of years. And this particular writer, once again, said to me, Vin, how would you like to go to do this play with me? And that's when the process of Cambridge and waiting and everything took place. So it went backwards for me. I actually went to Hollywood and did television and films before I was invited to go to Broadway. And then I went to Broadway, did those shows off Broadway. They were comedic. And so two particular directors that I'm very fond of, Woody Allen and Barry Levinson, saw me in that Broadway play. And they invited me to come in and be in their movies.
That's
So the
fascinating.
transition from Broadway to movies was, I mean, I had already done a few movies, but the movies that I got as a result of Broadway were a direct result of having performed and being seen.
So now you'd mentioned you were on NYPD Blues.
Yeah.
You had a regular character on that. You've been on a lot of iconic TV shows like NYPD Blues, CSI New York, Law and Order.
Yeah, I did both Law and Orders, and a Special Victims Unit and the regular Law and Order. And as you know, they're very popular shows. So once you do a Law and Order, it's like you're in the lexicon of that show's following. So right now, like every Law and Order that's ever been shot is on either Netflix or somewhere, and my episode is forever there. You know what I mean? Which I love. I love that.
That's very cool to have that, to know you have that position in cinematic history.
Yeah.
What type do you have in those shows? Do you have a type of character that you play, or have you found that you're in a certain type of character, or that they give you a larger range of characters that you can stretch yourself with and play?
Okay, so when I first arrived in Hollywood, I did have a type. And that type, I never minded being typecast because it meant almost continuous work for me. and I was playing mostly thugs and bad guys, and those were on early shows like Wiseguy, and I'm trying to think of some of the others, but I played bad guys or thugs. Then what happened is the guest spots, and they are the most coveted roles on television. Unless you're the regular on the series, the best roles on television are the guest spots. And you know what they are. When you watch a show, that's usually the main character that is not a part of the cast, but that week, the story or the crime revolves around that character. So I loved doing that. I mean, for both Law and Orders, I played two different roles. One, I played a kind of sleazy, what do you call it, service guy. I was into delivering oxygen tanks to people's houses, and I found a dead body, and the whole story revolved around that. And when I did the regular Law and Order, I played a dirty cop. And that was fantastic because that was the season that Dennis Farina was on the show. And I was friends with him already, having done Crime Stories and other TV shows that he was the star of. So the experience on the regular Law and Order show was also wonderful. But they were two types that were very different, the sleazy public servant and the dirty cop. And they were really good for me. They were character roles that I got to. I was just saying this to somebody the other day. The great thing about guest spots is they respect you professionally. So you got to show up. You got to act professionally. You have to be very prepared, and you have to bring your skill set to bear. You know, because they're asking you to play a character without much rehearsal. You don't get to meet, when you do a guest spot on television, you don't get to meet and talk to the other actors very much. You meet on the set, and the director says, okay, here's what we're doing today. And then you just do it.
That's a brilliant segue. It's like you've done this before.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for a role on a show when you're going from sleazy guy to bad cop to, I know you've also played a lawyer.
Yeah, I played lawyers. I played a judge in one show called Eli Stone. I played not next door neighbor, but like a guy who was just giving out information on Without a Trace and NCI, not NC, CIS New York, and Castle, where I was just the owner of a mansion that was haunted, and they came to interview me. And I was kind of irreverent and snotty, you know. So those little characters, they flavor the script for that week, because procedurals, you're talking a lot about procedurals, shows that deal with, okay, there's a case to solve and we have an hour to do it. And within that hour, you need to meet the other characters like me who are going to convey information to the audience and to the lead characters of the show so they could go about solving the crime. On Criminal Minds, however, I played a cop. And so I got to interact with the Criminal Minds team as they were solving a bigger crime. I got to interact with them more because I wasn't a dirty cop. I was a clean cop, a helpful cop.
Okay.
So they're all really wonderful. I was telling somebody the other day that I think it's an honor and a privilege to get a guest star role. And when you get them, you are expected to deliver. And I think I always did, which was good for me and my cachet, how people regarded me. They say, oh, let's get Vinny Guastaferro. I've seen him on this. He's pretty damn good. Why don't we get him to do this character? And it led to a lot of continuous work, which was good for me and my family.
How do you prepare for all these different types of roles?
Okay, so, wow, that's a good one. You know what? I hate to say this, but I prepare the same way every time, which is I start with the text. So I read the script, and then I read it again, and then I read it again, and I start taking notes. And what I do, and this might be helpful to you because you're all about action, is I look for what are the actions before I even look for memorizing my lines. Say, what are the actions? So if it says the cop comes in the door and he runs away, it's important for me to know that my character would flee the police as opposed to stay there and answer questions. So I deal with outlining all my actions. Then I go through the script, and I want you to see my hand. So a script is like this. It's an arc. And you have to figure out where in the arc do you appear. So I'm going to put my fingers up. So I might appear in the opening segment and then not be seen again until after the second commercial, and I'll be in the wrap-up. Now, as you know, in television, they don't shoot anything in order. So the reason I prepare an arc like that is because on the first day of shooting, my scene was this one. It was after the first commercial. And then near the end of the shoot, here I am doing the introduction to the show. So you have to have your whole part mapped out. Again, I call it a map. So that way, when they call you in and they say, today, this is where we are in the script, this is what we're doing, you know where you came from, what you just did, and what's required of you for that day. So that way, if your character had an emotional change, let's say, in Act 1, you've already gone through that, and now you know what you're carrying from that into the next scene, even if they start on that second or third scene. One of my best stories for that is and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to go on a little tangent. So I once did a fairly big role in a TV movie. The movie was called Nitti the Enforcer, and it was about Frank Nitti, the criminal who worked for Al Capone. But I was Al Capone. And that was a great privilege to play a historic character. At that time, I think only like 5 other actors had played it before me, and one of them was like Rod Steiger and Ben Gazzara and some really big names. And so I felt the pressure, not the social pressure, but the personal artistic pressure to say, I got to be responsible to this and I have to do a good job. So that was a great role simply because I had to do a lot of research. But the point of the matter is one of the scenes in the script was when Al Capone's brother Frank dies, and I show up at the funeral home and I walk up to the coffin and I break down crying and I grab his lapels in the coffin and I have his lapels like this and I'm going, Frankie, Frankie. That was the first scene we shot. Mm. So when, you know, you talk about my arc in that movie was really big because it was one of the main characters. And on my very first day of shooting, I had to shoot a totally, completely emotional scene that was like on page like 75 instead of on page 1, you know, and being prepared in the way, that's why I prepare in the way I do. And when I teach, I try to teach students that too.
Well, the experience. Now, that actually, it's not a question that I had thought of before, but when you bring up that you started in Hollywood, that films out of order, and then you went to Broadway, which is in order.
Right.
Did you find that transition difficult?
Well, I had done so many plays before I went to Hollywood. I mean, you got to remember, I stayed in Chicago 4 years after I graduated grad school, and I did a lot of plays there, meaning many. I did many plays there, like maybe 15.
Okay.
And that's where I made my bones. I mean, I loved Chicago for that reason. I got my professional, after I exited school, I got my professional theater career going right away. I got hired often, and I was good at it because my training was in theater. So I learned a lot more about theater, and while I was there, I also got my equity card, my AFTRA, and my SAG cards. So before I went to Hollywood, I was equipped with my union cards and a really good resume, because I wouldn't have hit the ground running as I did in Hollywood if I hadn't done that stuff first. So for me, once again, it was all about being prepared for the next step, you know. So I had done a lot of plays. Then the transition to working out of order was really difficult, but fortunately on television, I started with some small to medium-sized roles, and then I cut my teeth on the bigger roles, and then that led to movies, and that led to Broadway, and that led to more movies. So that's how my journey went anyway. Some people have a different journey.
That made me think of shows like Harry Potter, where the actors start really young and don't necessarily have the chops like you had developed.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're thrown into not just acting and being this character, but doing it out of order. It's got to really twist the mind as you're trying to get used to it.
Yeah, I think it does, but at the same time, if you're very young, you don't really, I don't want to say you don't care very much, but you're not as concerned. And also, let's face it, in Harry Potter, all of those young actors were in the hands of super skilled directors, people who had a vision, people who had their complete script storyboarded, so they had a physical image for every shot. And I think that helped those young people act in those movies. I mean, you know, the story about Steven Spielberg is he storyboards every shot of every movie he's in. And at the very beginning with like E.T. and what was the other one where the spaceship comes down? Oh, Jesus, I can't forget.
Close Encounters? No.
Yeah, Close Encounters. But especially with E.T., he was directing young kids, especially the young Drew Barrymore. And Steven Spielberg at that time, his whole philosophy is you don't ask a young actor to feel sadness. You give them the action of sadness. So if you take a cute little girl like Drew Barrymore at the age of 6 or 7, whatever she was in that movie, and you tell her to go like this, the audience believes she's sad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Probably when he yells cut, she says, okay, can I have an ice cream cone or whatever? I don't know. But the bottom line is he was all about giving the kids the physical action. The kid who played, the kid who befriends E.T., he had to spend a lot of time going like this, you know, because he was bewildered and by the wondrousness of it all. And that, I think, is another key to what I teach, which is the actions will speak way louder than the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had also mentioned that you've done a few horror movies, and
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of this. What horror movies have you been in? And because I know there's a lot of people that really like the genre of horror. What characters and what movies have you done in the horror genre?
Okay, so my first horror movie was a pretty iconic one. It was it was part of the Friday the 13th franchise, but it was part 6. So the movies had already been established and they had a fan base. And here we were coming along with yet another version of it that had to be different and engaging and keep that fan base, because all the producers and the studio wanted was, look, we got 10 million people who love these movies. Just deliver a product that they're going to be interested in, that they're going to care about, they're going to like. And so I did this character in Friday the 13th, part 6. His name was Rick Cologne. He was supposed to be, you know, Cologne, like cologne. Yeah. And he was supposed to be a little sleazy and a little vain. So I had long black hair and it was combed cool. But I was also the comedic relief. So I got to do a lot of shit like jumble Chinese food and drop it all over the place. And I had a lot of iconic lines where I would say things to the lead character as I was putting him in jail. And one of those iconic lines caught on with the fan base. And that's why to this day, 30 something years later, I get invited to conventions because fans of that genre just want to come up to me and say that line for me, man, say that, come on, say it. And I'll say it, and then I'll sign an autograph for them or a poster that they have because they are collectors. And that movie has been one of the most rewarding movies. Like, let's face it, Stephen, you can see in my resume, I've done 30 other movies, right? Or more. And nobody ever comes up to me and says, oh, I want your autograph, or will you say that line for me? No, they're just regular movies, good ones, very good movies, high quality movies, studio releases, but they don't have the same fanatical following that the horror genre has. And so I've kind of allowed myself to tap into that because the fans want it, and I love rabid fans. So then I did a second movie, and what was important about that was the director was a very famous horror director. He did Nightmare on Elm Street and a couple of movies before that. His name was Wes Craven.
Yeah.
And he was considered the godfather of horror. And he had hired me to be in a movie called Shocker, in which I
remember that.
Yeah. And in which I played a cop again, and I had a wonderful death scene. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, everything before the death scene was just like me being a guy doing his duty until I get possessed by the monster. And then I have this great chase scene where I'm chasing the main character and shooting at him and cursing at him. And then I have a whole personality change where I become myself again, and then I become the monster again. And that was just such a great role to do, especially under the direction of Wes Craven. So those two were major. And then I did a couple of other funky little ones that never caught on. So nobody even really knows what they are and where they came from. And I let that be because there's nothing to talk about if nobody has an interest in it. But for Friday the 13th, Part 6 and Shocker, there are a million rabid fans out there. And I am always paying tribute to the fans.
I'm one.
Go ahead.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I bought Shocker from the Dollar DVD Club. Right? All this time I didn't realize that was you in there, and just so funny.
Well, that's okay. I was much younger and I had long black hair, whereas now it's long gray hair, you know.
Which actually brings me to my next question. Do you do, or did you in your other roles do action acting? Not stunt work, but action sequences in your roles?
Yeah, it depends on what you call action, but like in Wiseguy, my character locks himself in a church tower with a rifle, and I'm trying to assassinate somebody. And the way they filmed that sequence was they had the bell tower in the church set up as almost like a set on stage. So the fourth wall was out here, and I got to play all of my action because I was going mad from mercury poisoning. And so I had to talk to myself and then hear voices and then run over there and grab a bucket and throw up in it and then come back and load my gun and then look out the window and target my people. So that's what I consider an action sequence. Also in the movie Homicide, we had a shootout at the end of the movie. In another show I did, my character had to get hit by a car, and I thought they were going to ask me to do it. So in the television movie I did for Michael Mann called LA Takedown, which was the precursor to his movie Heat, I had to do weapons training. I had to go up to a shooting range with all of the actors and shoot live ammo out of fully automatic weapons, which I had never done before. So one of the perks of getting a role like that is the inherent amount of training that you have to do. And then in the movie, I got to hold up a bank and shoot my automatic weapon at the other, the cops were coming to get me, and I would shoot at them. And what was wonderful about that was the size of the production value. So I would shoot at them, and behind them there was a glass store window that like shattered and bottles of liquor exploded and fell on the floor. But you got to realize there was nothing coming out of my gun. So all of that was practical effects going on the other side. You know what I mean? Guys cueing the squibs and cueing the glass to break. And that was a very, very exciting experience also. But yeah, throughout my career, I've had to shoot guns, run into buildings, run out of buildings. In that same movie, LA Takedown, I'm making a getaway and I'm running down a side street, and for my own protection, I scoop up a little girl off of her lawn so the cops won't shoot me. And I'm running with this little girl in my arm and my MP5 in my other hand. And then the hero of the movie comes around and nails me right in the forehead. And that was a bit of action because I had to learn how to let the girl down gently so she could hit the ground with her feet and then run away out of the shot and take the hit like this and go boom, boom, and collapse. And I did a lot of that myself. So, you know, I learned a lot about action in doing these movies. One more point. One of the movies I did, I hope this is a good story because it's a little weird. And you can always cut it out if it's inappropriate. I had to do some knife fighting training. And I went to a very famous school for martial arts. It was called Dan Inosanto. He's the guy who trained Bruce Lee, right?
Yeah.
So I'm and a lot of other celebrities. So I'm in his studio, and he had taught us the basic moves for a knife fight, which was a slash, a slice, a stab, or something like that. I don't remember them now. And I was working on a dummy, and here I am. I'm slashing and stabbing and stabbing and stabbing, and I look up, and on the wall above me, there's a signed photograph to Dan from O.J. Simpson. And that totally freaked me out because I thought, this is a guy who was accused of killing 2 people with a big, like, Bowie knife and slicing the shit out of them in like 2 seconds, apparently. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit because I'm stabbing and I'm learning and everything. And then all of a sudden I see O.J. Simpson up there and I'm going, oh my God, this is where he trained. You know, because
all of a sudden it got real.
Yeah, it got real. Yeah.
It quite often when you're training in martial art, or for something, it's its own little bubble, but then something can happen and you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is like real. This could be real stuff.
Yeah, right. It wasn't any longer just a fantasy. It was like, oh, people can learn this and do this. And of course, you looked up and you saw the O.J. Simpson picture and things got real. Yeah. And so that was pretty interesting for me as an actor to realize. What I was going to say is Dan Inosanto also had trained a lot of Navy SEALs and other people who had to learn edged weapon techniques. And not the kind you teach, which is really wonderful also, but more of the close-up kind of like kill somebody right away technique, like you see in these movies that have military guys in them.
We met in Hawaii working on a production with Dawn Runner Productions, called Dorkcore, which it was the first time I'd been tapped to travel to work on a show, and it was a great pleasure to meet you and work with you there. But it was a different kind of role for you.
Oh yeah,
you've done this kind of role. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did in Dorkcore and how it was different than what you're used to?
Well, I don't think I had ever done anything that was a fantasy genre before, so I was concerned about, like, how do you play fantasy? And just like anything else, I realized you don't play fantasy, you play action. And so once again, I did my work. I went through the script really diligently. I identified actions that I had to take. I was very lucky enough to have this young director, Daryl Gabonia, right?
Yes.
Wasn't he our guy? Yeah.
Yes.
And he's a young, talented guy, and he had a vision, and Luke had written the script with him, Luke Cohn, our mutual friend. And they just thought that I was perfect for the role temperamentally and what I brought to it, because of course I was like, 20 years younger than everybody else in that cast, maybe 30 years, older, I meant. And so I was the elder there. But how I prepared for it was basically to have an idea of how nuts I had to be in any given moment. And then as I say, we were blessed with Daryl Gabonia, who would look at it and say, yeah, that's what I want. Fine. You're ready. So go ahead. And if you remember that battle sequence, of course you remember, you were there for every step out in the field. I just let it play beat by beat. And that's where your genius came in, because you were able to say, we're going to break this down. And you made it very safe. I remember getting hit in the face with the club and going like this. And then they added the blood effect later. So it looked like I got really smashed in the face. So it was a wonderful time to do that. And you were managing, I think, 4 or 8 actors that had swords or some kind of weapon in their hand, clubs and bats and swords, So it was a really wonderful sequence. And to this day, I'm still very proud of Dorkcore. I thought it was a great little movie, probably ahead of its time, which is now Dorkcore would be accepted and be pretty much a regular movie, I guess,
Yeah, especially with all this D&D stuff that's coming out more and more online now.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I remember a lot working with you there on set was helping you feel comfortable with falling down after that hit. Learning to trust that you can fall down without getting hurt.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun to work with you and to watch you and all the other actors perform and do your trade. It was great to learn.
Yeah, it was a fun experience, and you made it great too. I mean, I my hat is off to James Fox, who is the owner of Dawn Runner, and his company has gone on to do wonderful projects since then. I'm not saying Dawn Runner was his calling card, but it was one of his first in-house productions that he did by himself with that wonderful cameraman. If you remember, his name was Jeff something, or Jeff,
yeah.
But he was really, really a great technical wizard, and I had never experienced digital filmmaking before. So if you remember, they were able to shoot a sequence and then run back to their truck and watch it instantly, which I had never seen before. I always thought, well, you got to wait for dailies, and then, the next day they show up in a box on a roll of film and you see them, but not with them. Those guys were on their game, and it was a great learning experience for me too. So we had James Fox, and we had Daryl, yourself, Luke Cohn, who was in it as well as an actor. And it was a really great experience for me.
It was for me as well. And that brings me to my next question for you. What's the most memorable role that you've played?
It's interesting. Somebody asked me this just the other day, and I would have to say my role in Friday the 13th Part 6 as Deputy Rick Colon, because I was a part of, it was the first time I was a part of the entire process of a studio movie. And the learning experience from that was really wonderful. And it's what made me fall in love with movie making, because it's an immense collaboration of experts. And so you have the fight director like yourself, who is an expert. You have the guy who puts the microphone on your neck is an expert. The guy who drags the wires around the grips are experts. The makeup people, the costume people, are cinematographers, are all experts. but when they yell rolling, you, the actor, me, is now they're counting on me to be the expert, to bring my skills to bear. So yeah, let's face it, every producer would like it if every actor can do every shot in one take, and that just never happens. But it's what made me fall in love with movie making, which is why it's my most memorable role.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
You have an amazing resume on screen and stage.
Yeah, thanks.
But are you still doing any work on stage, or are you primarily screen now?
No, I did a play out here in Los Angeles just maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago now. I mean, time flies, and I was one of the leads in a pretty well-written drama. And it was written by, what's his name? Kaz Kaczynski. And it was a barroom drama that was actually first produced in New York City in the, I would say late 60s, early 70s, and it was revived out here at a pretty good theater, the one I work at, the Victory Theater. And once again, you know, this is why I think it's important for an actor to be trained and have a skill set, because I had not been on stage in several years. And then what happened is I was given this role, and it was a sizable role, and it was one of the drivers in the play. You know, every play has, like in Cheers, you had the people who drove the plot, which was usually the bartender Sam, and you had the reactors, which was usually people like George Wendt, who just sat at the bar drinking beer and would throw in a funny line every now and then. So in the play that I was doing, I was one of the drivers, and I had a lot of responsibility for coming out, interacting with the other main characters, giving information to the audience that would help them forward the plot in their mind. And I had to go back to work, and I had to create my arc again, and I had to find out, where am I? And fortunately, as you said earlier, plays start at the beginning and they finish at the end. So there was not that challenge of finding what's next, but rather ordering my sequences and knowing my ins and outs, when to come in, when to leave, how to show up on time, how to make a dynamic entrance. So when you enter, the audience reacts either with a laugh or whatever they're going to react to, given the circumstances of the plot. So I'm active in the theater, and as you know, I still teach. And teaching acting is a great way to keep my head in the game, because I'm constantly reviewing, I don't want to say the rules, but the basics that every actor needs to know.
And I do definitely want to touch on your school as well. But a question I have here is, we are all busy. We all have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of concerns, especially in these days. But when you're preparing for a role, how do you go about memorizing all of those lines and those? I mean, it's so much information, and your cues and your timing, not even considering the action parts of it. How do you do that, prepare for that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, okay, so you're talking about the two. I feel that the two can't be done without, in other words, your lines have to be attached to your actions. Once you do that effectively as an actor, then you'll never forget your line. So for me, when I'm memorizing, I actually pantomime walking through the actions as I say the lines. I'm also, one of the things I teach is what kind of memorizer are you? And I know that I'm audio, I need to hear it. So I put the other actors' cues on a audio tape, and then I play it and I come in with my line, and I play it and I come in with my line, and I play it and I come in with my line. So I learn it by listening. I do that often with the script in front of me. So if I could see it while I'm hearing it, I'm learning it better. And then, as I said, I attach it. Once I'm getting to the point where I got the lines, I have the lines memorized, then I start pantomiming the actions that go along with them. So I'll always remember that when I say cross to the bar and order a drink, that's the next sequence of lines where I talk about how hard the business is and so forth and so forth. I'm basically referring to the play I did at the Victory called On the Money.
Right.
And that was a really great experience because there was a lot of physical action in the play because the director was of that ilk also. He wanted things happening on stage all the time. So you were never just standing there talking. Like the guy who played our bartender, poor guy, he had to be on stage cleaning glasses and setting up the clean glasses over here and washing the dirty glasses while he was having dialogue with me. There was no way he could have done that unless I showed up early every night and said to him, hey, let's run this sequence. And he would run it. And that was for a lot of reasons, to help each other, and also just technical glitches. Like you can't have him clinking the glasses at the wrong time where it might obscure a line that's being said. So I memorize. It's a total body experience for me. I need to see it, I need to hear it, and I need to do it.
That's fascinating. As you know, I teach sword fighting, knife fighting, both as a martial art as well as for stage and screen. And my methodology is see it, say it, hear it, do it.
Yeah.
Get every learning aspect. And it's great to hear you say the same thing.
Yeah. See it, say it, hear it, do it. I love that. I'm going to adapt that and tell that to my students.
Yeah, that way we
I won't steal it. I'll give you credit for it. I won't say I invented this. I'm going to say a good friend of mine, Stephen Thicke, came up with this. But they'll get it because they've been studying with me for years, and they kind of know what I expect them to be able to do.
That's actually a perfect segue. My next question is, you also run a successful studio for classes and private coaching called The Sport of Acting.
That's right.
When did you start that school?
Okay, so it's another, I hope, interesting little story. But here's the thing. I was teaching for somebody else. I was teaching at an organization for somebody else. And I met these two young men who were Italian guys, real Italians, like their fathers were from Italy and still had property over there. They were both fluent in the language. They knew that I was a proud Italian American. And I hit it off with these two guys. And one of the kids, I don't want to call him a kid, but he was young at the time. He came to me and he said, you know, my dad's producing a movie in Italy and I have a pretty big role in it. And I would like you to come to Italy with us and be my coach. So at the time I was still in New York doing something. I forgot what I was doing there, a series called The Beat, and in which I played a cop. But anyway, that producer came up from wherever he was located, I think Southern Jersey, and he met me and he took me out to a really nice dinner. And he said, okay, you're perfect. I want you to come along and help my son, but you're perfect for a role in the movie. What would you say to playing that role? And I said, hell yeah, sure. Count me in. And so that turned out to be one of the greatest experiences of my life because they flew me to Italy and I stayed there 7 weeks.
Wow.
As one of, let's say, 3 to 4 people who spoke English, and everybody else was speaking Italian. And while I was there, I befriended a lot of actors that were working on the movie. Some of them were from Rome. One of them was from Germany. Another one was from Morocco. There were all these, it was a great blend of different cultures, and they were all there to be in this movie, but every one of them had expressed to me their desire to learn what they called the American style of acting. And they said to me, if I ever come to America, will you meet with me? Will you help me? Will you teach me? Will you coach me? And I said, yeah, sure. You know, so I didn't expect such a good turnout, but after that movie, about 15 people from Europe showed up. Norway, Denmark, Germany, France, Italy, Brazil, Colombia, all over the globe. And they showed up and said, "We're here, let's go." And so I started the sport of acting right on that spot. I said, well, here, I have enough to get my own class. I don't have to work for this other person anymore. So I started my own class. And it's been 15 years since that happened. And I've had a successful school. Over 1,000 students have passed through my school. And here's the way I look at it, Stephen. If somewhere down the line, one of these young people is involved with an acting project and they're confronted with some kind of acting problem, if they say to themselves, oh, I remember something to do with this, Vinny taught me that. Even if it's one thing, I feel like I've done my job, because I've helped put a tool in their acting box that they can now pull out and solve a problem with. And it's been very rewarding. And some of my students, to go further with how rewarding it is, some of my students just latched on to me. I had one student, this young lady who just left me this year. She was with me 13 years. I had another guy that was with me for 10 years. Nice. I have students right now that are with me 8 and 9 years, 7 years, 4 years, and some people who have been with me 3 months. So I'm always mixing my veterans with the newcomers in my class, because I have a philosophy that veterans need to work with newcomers so they get reminded of the problems and insecurities that new people are confronted with. And new people need to work with veterans because you learn from them. And that's the way it is in the real world. I think I may have told you this once, but one of my great TV spots was on a show called Pros and Cons. And it starred 2 iconic old TV actors. Actors. One of them was Richard Crenna, and the other one was James Earl Jones. Wow. And here I am doing exactly what I'm teaching, which is I'm working with a veteran now. And now in the next day, I'm going to turn around and do a part with some young guy who's also in that TV show. And he turns to me and he says, "This is my first time ever acting. I'm so excited." And I thought, so over here I have a first timer, and over here I have James Earl Jones. And I realized that's the way it is in the world. So why shouldn't it be like that in class?
That is exactly how I teach my martial arts schools as well. It's a really great way to go. It must be so exciting for you to work with all these actors, both young and experienced, and then to watch them move on and see them progress in their career and see them on stage or screen. Yeah, it is. For you, what do you enjoy most about acting? About acting? Yes. Okay, so I know this is going to sound a little almost hippie-ish, but then again, I am, so what do I care? The personal reward for acting for me is that if I feel that during my performance, my character says or does something that resonates with an audience member, that makes them go home that night and think about something that's real. So when I was on Broadway, I was doing this wonderful play. And in that play, I had 7 or 8 monologues that lasted 2 to 3 pages. Wow, that's a lot of memorizing. That's a lot of memorizing. It was the most memorizing I ever had to do. And when I was out on stage in the middle of some of those monologues, I could hear people, I could see the heads of the people sitting in the closer part of the audience going, identifying with what I'm saying. One or 2 times that I remember distinctly, women and men broke down crying during my monologue because it was so reminiscent of them, of something that was real in their life. Yeah. And I thought that was the privilege and responsibility that was given to me as an actor. If I'm up there and I'm doing my job right, I'm reaching across this medium of, being on stage,
And everybody knows stage is, I don't want to say fake, but it's a play. Let's face it, it's a play. But somebody in the audience has heard me say something or seen me do something that resonates with them, and I've touched them personally. That was my greatest reward. And so whenever I do a role, I'm always looking for what's the one thing I could add that someone can take personally, can take a personal reference from, can identify with. And in horror movies, it was usually something comedic that I said or did. But in dramas, you're always looking for that moment where you can say or do something that touches the audience. So what I enjoy most about acting, to go back to your original question, is the responsibility, the honor, the privilege of being able to touch somebody's mind, heart, soul.
That, sir, is an amazing answer.
Yeah.
And my last question for you.
Sure.
What do you enjoy most about teaching?
Okay, this is a good one because I actually love teaching. And you know, besides the selfish reasons that I get to review everything I know every time I have to convey some information to somebody, what I enjoy the most is the nurturing of young people. To take people who, this is the way I present it to them even. I say, this is your journey, not mine. I am not the kind of teacher who wants to make it all about me and what I've done and what I've accomplished and why I am to be respected. It's to win their respect by winning their trust. And if you win someone's trust, that's why you end up with a student that'll stay with you 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 years. And in that time, you get to nurture them. So I've had people come into my class that are complete beginners. And within 3 to 4 weeks, I have them on scene, on stage, acting with authority. And then after I get them through the basic steps of, you know, the questions, good acting is based on questions. If you want good answers, you have to ask good questions. I teach them how to ask questions. I also provide them with tools that they can put in their actor toolbox. So when they confront problems of acting later, they can reach into their toolbox and hopefully they'll say, I learned this from Vinny, and now I'm going to use this screwdriver to solve this problem. Or okay, I don't need that tool. That's the wrong tool. Let me go get the small crescent wrench. And they solve acting problems based using the tools that I have provided them, or at least made them aware of, that are at their disposal for use. So I like nurturing people. And on a very personal level, like, let me give you an example. So I have a young woman in my class, right? When she started with me, she was 23 years old and she was from England. And she was very excited to be in my class, and she was on whatever media was popular at the time, Facebook, I think. And she was saying, oh, I love Vinny's class. Vinny is Vinny this, Vinny that. Oh, I love his class. My friend just joined the class. Now we're studying with Vinny. And then I shift gears, Stephen, because you can identify with this. I'm a parent, you know, and I think, okay, so now this young lady has a parent sitting 9,000 miles away in England saying to himself, who the hell is Vinny? You know, what the hell is this? So I said to her, please, Lauren, invite your dad to class. So her dad comes over from England to visit her, and he sits in on a class. He and I hit it off immediately. We become beer drinking buddies. I've gone out to dinner with him several times. And in that, this man is saying to himself, I trust Vinny with my daughter. I trust that she is not going to be bullshitted. She's not going to be lied to. She's not going to be sold a bag of goods that are not true. She's going to be nurtured and attended to as she should be in a quality educational situation. And ironically, after that guy visited my class, the parents of 4 or 5 other students visited my class. So now I have this 2 groups of people. I have these wonderful students, and then they're so proud to be in my class that they want to invite their parents. And so the second group is the parents of all of those kids who stay in touch with me on Facebook, or they say, I'm coming back to America for to visit my kid. You want to go out to dinner, or you want to meet at a pub for a beer. And the payback on that is one of my sons studied drama at a pretty prestigious program at the University of Minnesota, and he had to spend a semester abroad in London. And while he was there, my wife and I went over to see him perform on a British stage. And those parents of that girl drove down to London from wherever they were and met us and took us out to dinner, and we got a tour of London through him. He was kind of a historian. And so that it's a reciprocity thing. You know, when I shot Dork Core, I was staying at Luke Cohn's mother's house. So I met Luke Cohn's mother, brother, sister-in-law, and his father on that trip. And we have since become friends. And whenever they're in town, they say, oh, I want to see Vinny, even if it's for 10 minutes. And that level of, that's one way I feel like I must be doing something right. Because if you're a parent and you're concerned about your kid, in a good way, like I want to make sure that my kid is not talked down to. I want to make sure that they are respected, that they are treated with professionalism and consideration. I thought by providing that for those young students, it nurtured a whole growth of this other network of people, which are the parents of the students. So, and I'm not talking little kids, I'm talking parents in their now 30s. Yeah. And their parents come to town from other countries or from wherever, other parts of the United States, and they want to visit with me. They want to say hi and check in and come sit in on a class. And that is also so very rewarding for me. So what's the most rewarding thing about teaching is taking beginners, giving them something to do, and watch them grow exponentially right in front of my eyes, making them ready. I teach a lot of camera audition classes because in Hollywood now, auditioning for television shows, a lot of it is self-taping. And so I teach self-taping classes and on-camera techniques so that they can go in and win. This is the way I phrase it. When you're going up for a role, what you want to do is you want to win. That casting director is going to see 35, 40 people, and you want to be the one that they pick. So I really, really enjoy my relationship with my students and nurturing them.
Yeah, it sounds, from this answer and from speaking previously, you don't have just an acting career. You don't have a school. You have a community that you've developed that is so much deeper and brings in not just the people you're working with primarily, but so much more. And that just by itself, having a community, is something that we as humans not just need, but thrive with. And you offer that.
Yes, I do. And I'm quite pleased with that. I mean, imagine, if you will, I have a class of people that have been with me 5, 6 years, and then a new person steps in. And at first, their first vibe is like, oh God, I don't know these people. I don't know what I'm going to do in here. They all seem to understand Vinny better than I do. And I'll immediately pair up one of my veterans with a totally new person. So the learning process starts instantly. And one of my veterans will say to the new person, don't worry, you're in good hands. Don't worry, I know what he's going to be looking for. He'll help you out. And they become friends. And that's how the community forms. So you get somebody who's totally new in your class who within weeks is now working outside of class on little film projects, like the Dork Core and all of these other projects that emanate out of their own efforts. And that is wonderful to me, that I could take 2 people who don't know each other, and a month and a half later, they're working together on a small film.
Yeah, that's always amazing. One of the things I'm very proud about with my school is I've had several marriages come out of my school.
Yeah,
It's just an amazing thing. And you have that same community. And speaking of being a father, we become a father to our people. You are a father, not to just your boys, but to each one of those people that come through.
that's right. And I offer that willingly because it's rewarding for me. You know what I mean? Um, you just said something else that triggered a thought, but it escaped me as quickly as it came. But they're an amazing set of people, and I really adore them. And we've been off for almost 2 months now, so I'm really looking forward to the pandemic calming down, everybody getting safe and smart, and then reconvening when we can. And I'm pretty sure every one of them is just going to come back to class because they've all contacted me and said, we miss it, we miss you, we miss working.
Yeah.
And in the
Well,
meantime, they're working together, which is also great.
that's even better. And uh, you've created the ability that they can.
Yeah.
So, Vinny, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, not just as a professional, not just as a friend, but also just as a generally nice guy.
Isn't that something, huh?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much. Uh, I like to be accessible to people, and I think I'm not putting anything on. I mean, even when I interview my students before they join my class, I say to them, who you're talking to right now is going to be your teacher. I'm not suddenly going to shift into some hoity-toity academician or somebody else. This is the guy.
Yeah.
This language, this sensibility, this energy is what you'll get in class. And it pays off in big ways. And thank you for mentioning the sport of acting.
Yeah.
It's in Burbank, California, and that's where I teach, what I teach. And new students are welcome if they come to LA. James Fox, our producer on Dorkcore, sent me a student, and she's been with me now over 2 years.
Fantastic. I may have another one for you as well.
Okay.
So thank you again for taking the time. And I'm going to put links to the sport of acting, to your IMDb page, and whatever else you would like in the description of this video.
That'd be great. That would be very great. So thank you for that. And Stephen, thank you for thinking of me. I mean, I know you're trying to, get together a list of people that you think would offer you some interesting conversations like this one for your show. And I'm proud and honored that you remembered me as somebody that would be worthy of your time. So it's reciprocal, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And take care of yourself. Be safe. Stay inside until it's time. But as soon as the pandemic's over, I can't wait to hear about all the new things that you're doing.
Yeah, and I'm doing a number of new things that I'm very proud of. So they'll be coming out soon.
We'll talk more. Thanks again for spending
Thank
time.
you again, Stephen. Bye-bye, and have a good luck to you and your family.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Vinny. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Take care, stay safe, and stay sane.